Hey friends, welcome back to First Church of God. Thank you for joining us this first Sunday of February. You're always welcome to join us here at the church as well. We love to see people because people matter. And we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, if you have been around us, you might have met my kid's dog. My daughter Ashley and her husband, they have a dog. Her name is Luna. She's still 100% puppy. Though she's 2 years old, she's 100% puppy. She's a blast. We love her. Fun dog. I like her. But I like her enough not to have my own dog because I just don't have time for them. I'm not home enough. But Luna is unique because in the evening, whether she's at our house or their house or the other parent's house, she has a kennel she stays in. She stays in a kennel at night, and that's for her own safety, so she doesn't overeat or tear up furniture or anything like that. And they have a routine. They say, Luna, you ready to go night-night? And she'll get off the couch or wherever she is, and she'll walk herself and get in the kennel, and they give her a treat, and she goes to sleep, and she's a great puppy. She can't wait till the morning, though, because when you turn the light on, you go to get her, that tail is banging on the side of the cage like a coffee cup wanting to get out. She is a lot of fun. But there's times when she'll get tired, and she'll just go and put herself in the kennel all by herself. She's an amazing dog. But think about that for a second. I think of that television series from years ago, Mayberry RFD, and there was a character by the name of Otis Campbell. Otis was the town drunk. And him and Sheriff Andy Taylor had an agreement that he could come and sober up there in the jail cell. Otis's wife would not allow him to come home drunk, so he would go in and unlock the jail cell himself, open the door, hang the key back up, and go and sleep it off in the jail cell. And we liked Otis for that character. He let himself in to the cell. It also makes me think of, happened several years ago in Denver. They got a brand new polar bear, but they hadn't finished building, or they hadn't gotten all the permits to build the new polar bear habitat. So the polar bear arrives, and they're thinking, okay, we'll be ready for him to be in this thing in 6 months. And that 6 months turned into 3 years. The enclosure that this polar bear was in was very small, and he could only take about 3 or 4 steps forward, 3 or 4 steps to the right, 3 or 4 steps back, 3 or 4 steps to the left. And day after day, he just made that pattern of a square in his cell all day long. Finally, 3 years, they got the cell, the habitat ready. There were waterfalls, there were pools, there were all sorts of things that I think a polar bear would like, because it was kind of like what he was used to before he became put in captivity. They release him. He goes out into this great, big, huge, humongous place, and he takes about 3 or 4 steps forward, 3 or 4 steps to the right, 3 or 4 steps backwards, 3 or 4 steps to the left. And he keeps that pattern going. I wonder what would have happened if they would have just opened the gate and let him go anywhere else in the park. I think he would have been stuck in his rut, doing the same thing over and over. That's kind of a definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And I believe that many of us have gotten into a rut. Kind of in our own captivity. I think of the bear, and I think he was kind of like he was imprisoned in his own imprisonment. He was stuck. And what happens when we get into a rut? Well, first of all, there is a loss of freedom. This bear had lost his freedom twice. First, he was put into captivity, and then he was put into greater captivity. He had lost his freedom. And when we get into a rut, we lose our freedom. We also tend to lose our perspective. We may not always know that we're in a rut, but we know something isn't quite right. And third, it grows deeper in time. Around 800 years before Jesus was born, in the nation of Israel, there was a group of people, and you might say they were in a rut. Politically, things were terrible. In a 20-year span of time, 4 different kings were assassinated. There was a war going on, but not too far from there, a love story begins to shape up and take place. I'm not talking a Hallmark movie, because there were just two people, maybe five, not 11 of the same people in all the other movies, just like all Hallmark movies are. But it's not a Hallmark story, even though it is some great love. And what I want you to understand, or what I want you to see in this, is that sometimes God calls us to do some really crazy things. But everything that God calls us to is for a purpose. There's a plan, and he always provides. Always provides. I invite you to look with me to the Old Testament, to the book of Hosea, chapter 1 is where we begin. And it says, the word of the Lord came to Hosea. And then we go through these names that are very difficult to pronounce. Verse 2, it says, when the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. So he marries Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. I want to encourage you to sit down and read at least through this chapter, if not through chapter 3, because what happens here, and it's very unique, is that we'll go backwards here. She bore him a son, okay? There are two more children born in chapter 1, but that doesn't say Hosea, she bore the children to Hosea. It just says that she had the kids. So whether Hosea was the father or not, we don't really know. Hosea is a prophet of God. He's got a good reputation. He's well respected. He's chosen by God. He's called by God. He is the voice of God to the people, telling them what's right and what's wrong. He had to be a righteous man for God to choose him. But he's asked to do something that seems rather crazy or out of the ordinary and go marry a woman who does not have a good reputation, one that has a very questionable past, one that doesn't, you probably wouldn't invite her over to your house. Everybody knew what she was like in town. Word got around. What kind of man would take on this assignment? Only a man who trusted that God had his best interests at heart. One day, Hosea comes home. Maybe he walks to the door and goes, honey, I'm home. We don't know. But when he came in, he didn't hear any reply, and he begins to search the house. He looks in the kitchen. She's not there. He looks in the living room. She's not there. She's nowhere to be found. And when he goes into the bedroom, he notices the closet door is open and most of the clothing except for his own is gone. The dresser drawers are open and they're empty, and that stash of money for his emergency fund that he had set back, a big chunk of it was gone. There wasn't a note or anything explaining what had happened. There hadn't been a crime or a struggle in the room. Gomer was her name, and she was goner. Gomer was goner. He attempted to process this in his mind, and he's trying to determine, what am I going to tell my children? What am I going to do with these three kids? Their mother has left them. He's brokenhearted. He had shown her something she wasn't used to. He had shown her unconditional love. He said, you're mine. I have redeemed you from this lifestyle that you are so familiar with. Gomer was like Otis. Gomer was like the bear. She was imprisoned in a prison. She was trapped. She was in a cage. She could only take a few steps in one direction. She had lost her freedom, and when she was given new freedom, she wasn't familiar with it, and she became afraid, and she went back to where she was. She had lost her perspective. She had gotten into a rut, and it had gotten deeper than the lines on her face. Conditional love is a prison, taking all that you have. I've often said, if you find yourself in a rut, the best thing you could do is put your shovel down. But maybe I need to add to that, if you find yourself in a rut, put your shovel down and look up to God. Because that is what Hosea did. He looked for God for direction. As he sought God, maybe he was hoping God would say, you know what? I'm sorry it didn't work out. Maybe God would say, just move on. Or you did your best. Move on and don't look back. She got what is coming to her. Instead, God says something that we don't expect, something that sounds crazy, but when God calls us to do something, he doesn't always make sense. He just provides what we need to do what he is asking us to do. Hosea chapter 3. The Lord said to me, God spoke to Hosea and said, go, show your love to your wife again. Though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves the Israelites. Though they turned to other gods and loved their sacred raisin cakes. So he bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lekith of barley. Then he told her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or to be intimate with any other man, and I will behave the same way toward you. Just in case you're curious about this, the price that he paid was equal to the price of a slave, about 30 pieces of silver. If you remember back, Joseph, he was sold for 20 pieces of silver. So we see inflation here, the price of a slave. But Jesus also was sold for the price of a slave. Why would he ever want her back? Why love her? She was probably just, she's probably just going to go back to that cell that she was so familiar with. This is too risky, Hosea. You better think twice. She isn't as pretty as she used to be. But God doesn't call the qualified. God qualifies the called. Hosea never stopped loving Gomer. And maybe he would ask around about her condition. Where was she and how was she doing? Was she happy? Was she sad? Did she need anything? There was nothing that could separate the love that he had for her, even her forgetting their wedding vows or forgetting their children. He loved her then, he loved her now, and he would love her for always. One day he heard that there was going to be a public auction. Something within him said he needed to go. He took all the funds that he had with him. And this auction wasn't there to buy furniture or cars or anything like that. It was more like a junkyard for humanity. Hosea had stepped into this cesspool of crude jokes, smelly places, laughter, and vulgarity. And he went in with very little hope. He took a chance that she might be there. He scanned the auction block and was about to turn and go away when all of a sudden he noticed something. He noticed one individual. He noticed it was her. And he began to bid. She was looking at the ground because her hope didn't see any higher than the dirt. Her hands were tied. She was the walking dead. He walked in with cash in hand and walked out with her in hand. He started with a questioned and downcast face. He walked in with his chin down, but he walked out with his chin up and moving hers in the same direction. Now, isn't this a picture of God? He has never stopped loving us, and he never will. And how could she have turned her back on this kind of love? It's easy. And I think that we are all guilty of it as well. We return to that jail cell because that is what we are familiar with. She had replaced God. She had chosen the cell over freedom. She didn't understand or want to understand what unconditional love is. And she didn't know how to receive unconditional love. She wanted to control everything. She wanted to control herself. She wanted to control her circumstances. Now, my friends, I am concerned that there's a number of people who even attend church that would never admit that they were prisoners of their own prison. The cage door is open, but they have become so comfortable in their cell that they don't know what life beyond the cell would be like. They don't understand the freedom that God has for them. And they desire what they are familiar with over anything else. I believe some who attend church might even say, I have enough of Jesus. I don't really need any more. My friends, that's a cage. That's a cage of the enemy. Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. The Bible says, if the Son has set you free, you shall be free indeed. You can't get out of a rut on your own. You need to call on Jesus. Hosea was Gomer's only hope for real life. And to experience unconditional love, Jesus is our only hope for the redeemed life, a life of freedom. I don't know about you, but I like banana bread. My preference is warm banana bread, no nuts, with some butter smeared on it. Probably really not on my diet, but that stuff is good. It smells so good. But what do we use to make banana bread? Oh, yeah, bananas, yes, but not just any bananas. You can't use green bananas. You don't want yellow bananas. And those that just have a few little black spots, not ready yet. You need the black banana, the banana that has been sitting on the counter in the kitchen that has gotten dark and is soft, and you think maybe I should throw it out. But that's where you begin with making banana bread. You take what everybody else would throw away. And what everybody else in Hosea's world would have thrown away and said, she's just a slave. She's no good, she's no good, she's no good. Hosea says, I know a recipe. I know somebody that can change her. And he brings her home. Gomer was sold as a slave, but look what Jesus says to those who have received his unconditional love, and they find their identity in him, and their approval doesn't from anybody else doesn't matter. It says in John 15:15, I no longer call you servants. I no longer call you slaves, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. If I take away all my titles, you take away husband, dad, pastor, Mr. Fix-It, creative guy, magician, you take away all of my titles, what am I? Who am I? I'll tell you, I am a chosen child of the Most High God, who sees me as greatly valued, and he has loved me with a perfect and an everlasting love. And that same thing can be said about you if you know Jesus as your forever friend. But how many times are we going back to that cell? How many times are we ignoring what he did for us? The writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews 2:3, how can we ignore so great a salvation? That word so means unmeasurable. And what does it say in John chapter 1 about us? It says, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. God has done nothing but demonstrate love for us. And it's an opportunity to love him back and to be grateful for what he has done in us and for us and through us. And that he will never leave us, that he will never forsake us. Oh, what God is calling you to do may seem crazy. Come, follow me. Come, trust me. Come, be like me. Maybe crazy or terrifying, but what he calls us to do. He equips us, he provides for us, and we can trust him. God has never stopped loving you. God has never stopped searching for you. He has never stopped giving to you. Gomer went home with her Redeemer, and so can you. Thanks for watching today. Bye-bye.